Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the TESL Career Boosts. Today, we are here with Kathy Hughes from the Center of Canadian Language Benchmarks. And today, what we're covering in particular are the amazing and the variety of the resources that CCLB does offer. So thank you, Kathy, again for being here and helping us, giving us that insight.
Great, sure, happy to do it. Yes, as we know, the CCLB site has a lot of great resources that people should try and take advantage of. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, to start off, what resources are available to all ESL newcomers through the CCLB website and the educational portal, e-learning portal?
Right, absolutely. Yes. I mean, because there are two different access points really into what's available. I'll start with the first one, and that's the CCLB website, and that's home to the key CLB benchmark document, and that can be accessed through language.ca, the publication tab. It's important to note that it is free to download these resources as e-files. And so that's how people can access, the key documents. But then, of course, the next question that's asked, well, how can we make the most of using these documents? Because, of course, they're pretty lengthy. So to support that, the CCLB also has, free open training to anyone who is interested in learning about the benchmarks. And that is done through the CCLB e-learning portal because, of course, it's a Moodle site, it's an interactive site. So where people want to start with that is at the CLB Bootcamp, because that's the foundation for increasing knowledge of the CLBs. So to confirm the CLB Bootcamp, it's a self-directed introduction to the CLB, and it helps familiarize participants with their role in planning and assessment. It's 3 modules. It has reading, obviously, and quizzes. It takes about a minimum of 420 minutes to complete, because we do want, people to take their time and make sure that they're reading through things. So it's also really key to point out it counts as 10 professional development hours, and it's absolutely recognized by TESL Ontario as professional development. So when folks are looking for their hours for that, it's key to note that. And it is the recommended first step for all CTESL graduates and new teachers if for some reason they haven't taken it in their program or if they're coming back into the profession, for sure. The next, also, people want to know whether or not there's any portfolio-based language assessment covered under this point. Yeah, and the last module of the CLB Bootcamp does provide a very small introduction, to PBLA. But then following that, once the CLB Bootcamp is complete, then participants can attend a self-directed introduction to PBLA training course.
Great. And with some of the documents that you mentioned before, is it still you just download them off the website, or is there a possibility to get them kind of mailed to you in case some people prefer the hard copies?
Unfortunately, right now, because
Definitely. And how would these resources be useful to novice teachers if we were talking about, just fresh grads rather than kind of feeling bombarded by all these resources, which are great, but where should they sort of start?
Yeah, I mean, all of the resources that we just mentioned, certainly the boot camp would be very useful to a novice teacher because, they provide the tools that they ultimately could be used daily in the classroom. And they really provide key exemplars, and often that's what, new practicing teachers, or if you're in just a different style of classroom that you're going to want to see, right? So again, one of the really go-to documents, for example, is the CLB support kit. For myself, I often do think it's one of the least used document because, this resource offers teachers real examples of tasks at different levels. So again, it provides that, like just that differences that you may be looking at when you're trying to figure out, well, what is the difference between CLB 1 and 3? So, that's what they would be really useful for new teachers, to get to know again, the different levels. And then, to assist with getting the most of the CLB support kit, as a supplementary course, it's fairly brief. It's maximizing the CLB support kit. So again, you were mentioning trying to eliminate how overwhelming it can be, sitting and going through a document by yourself. When you go through maximizing the CLB support kit course, again, it's just a couple of hours. It gives you some tips about how to really make use of it. So I would recommend it for sure. So it's an overview, again, of just how the resources and tools, that are found in the support kit, how they can support teachers. So, yep. And then this is where, these resources are found on the CCLB e-learning portal.
Great. Now, to take that kind of a step further, what about, teachers that have a little bit of experience, or those who have, they have been teaching for a long time, but maybe some of these resources are new to them? What would you recommend for those sort of more experienced teachers?
Yeah. Again, they are the core resources. They can always take a look again at the CLB document. But for those that are, a little more, they've developed their skills for a while, maybe they've taught somewhere else and are coming back into this kind of environment, or experienced teachers coming back from overseas, what's new to them. Yeah, definitely what is always ongoing and under development are what we call, the PBLA classroom resource modules. So these are the modules that are designed, they're real classroom material, and they're available on Tutela. They're also available because there is a full CCLB collection on Tutela, and and the modules are also available on Avenue, and they're also available under the PBLA guidelines as well. And they are being added to. We do develop about 10 to 12 new classroom modules per year. So again, for experienced teachers, you definitely want to just check in and see what's new.
For sure. Yeah. And what CLB resources are available that kind of fit into the kind of hybrid environment we're going into, where there is those in person, but there's also, remote learning?
Oh, yeah. Again, glad you asked. This again is where the PBLA classroom resource materials, really shine because they're made for present day. Again, those are the ones that are available on the PBLA guideline site, Tutela, and some of them are on Avenue as well. Because, again, as fortunately things have changed, I realized it was necessary to have material for all the different types of classrooms that are available. So there are two types of modules. One is the one that started to be developed, obviously, for what you would call your face-to-face sort of regular classroom. But then there's also components for blended learning. They're H5Ps, interactive, and so those are available also on Tutela and on Avenues. And to help people out with getting a sense of, the differences, we did develop a brief orientation video to the modules, and those are also located on the PBLA guideline and on Tutela's under the collections, CCLB collection. So what is helpful for that is it's called, an orientation to the CCLB multi-level and e-learning modules, because it breaks it down, how to make the most use of them. Specifically, again, we know that, having blended classrooms, has been so key over the last couple of years. So a couple of years ago, we did do a webinar on how to ensure validity in distance learning, and that's available on Tutela under past recordings.
Great. Oh, that's great. And just to switch over a little bit into assessments, what resources would you recommend to create different kinds of assessments?
Yeah,
different skills.
Sure. And different types for sure. So CCLB, we have assessment tools at different stages, to diagnose strengths and where, clients may be, the first key, but definitely the first key starting point would be a diagnostic assessment. Obviously, and then going from that, then the next steps would be taken to move into the whole assessment for learning principles that are used for classroom-based assessment, which is where we focus a little bit more on. And so these principles are the core pillars, that define PBLA. And the breakdown for assessment for learning is defined in how the core strategies are broken down, and then used to define clear expectations around what learners complete in class. So very classroom based. So this would be the ongoing process used throughout the term. So the CCLB resources to check on other samples that are particularly this is for the ESL for all support kids. Actually, that one does focus more for literacy, but that's also where there are, again, the sample modules and lesson plans, and it really is, again, a really good tool for breaking that down. So, and also then in addition, the PBLA modules, they have, all different themes at the different CLB levels. But then the key thing within that is they do provide the skill using tasks, the self-reflection, goal-setting templates, and that's what all promotes and is tied to, the whole assessment for learning strategies. So, summative or assessment for learning, it's definitely a part of the learning process, and normally, in this case, is conducted at the end of a learning unit or a term. So, as I mentioned, the PBLA module packages have samples for the assessment tasks that would be done at the end of a unit. So, those are all really good resources.
Makes sense. And also, you mentioned that you would, be doing the CLB bootcamp first, and then that gives you a bit of an introduction into PBLA. But is there a beginner's guide for PBLA, like a separate sort of document or resource?
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of fairly easy ways to get into PBLA. That certainly is a frequently asked question. I would say certainly a quick starting point is the practice guidelines site for PBLA. That houses all of the resources and guidelines. So, this site contains essential information for all stakeholders, whether it's a classroom teacher or getting to know about the role of a PBLA lead or an administrator. It has multiple sections, so people can choose the ones that are the most relevant for them. It does start, with the foundation and the background, and then the key components for portfolios, certainly for the reporting. That's also questions people have. Again, just general knowledge around, accountability, and certainly, again, a key one is the resources. I often do send people directly to the frequently asked question tab if there's something that they have specific questions about. That's updated regularly. And again, if people were honestly looking for something, say, to prep before an interview, we did do a document that's called Why PBLA. And again, I think it would be something that people might be able to pull from for, just prepping for an interview potentially.
Sure.
So then after, successfully completing the CLB bootcamp, then as we mentioned, we would recommend participants proceed with this. This is the self-directed introduction to portfolio-based language assessment for classroom teachers. So it is self-directed, but this just helps, to continue building knowledge around PBLA and what it covers in the introduction. That's where they'll be trained on, as we mentioned, the assessment principles and best practices. It does cover task-based planning. It covers, CLB focus-led assessment, CLB-based assessment, and certainly, again, assessing for both the productive skills and assessing for the receptive skills, and then really putting and implementing PBLA in action. So that's it.
Oh, that's great. That's a great variety of resources. What resources are available to TESL program educators through CCLB?
Yes. They are a select group, certainly. And so we realize that, to support coordinators or really instructors that are involved with the TESL educator programs, both, in Ontario and elsewhere. We did develop a specific TESL educator library. And for that, they just need to reach out to us at CCLB, at, PBLA at language.ca, for more information, because it just compiled, certainly, all the resources that were discussed here, but just a little bit more in some cases, of, maybe the history or ways of combining, certain items that would be of particular interest to TESL educators.
That's great. Is there anything else you'd like to kind of mention about any resources or other resources, beyond PBLA or the CLB?
Nothing's coming to mind right now. Again, I would just, I would really just suggest, that folks, occasionally visit the this language.ca website for anything that would be up to date, and
Sure.
to follow us on LinkedIn, certainly, and we have, general emails as well online. So just reach out if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy. It was very insightful. And it's great to have someone actually walk you through where everything is and what's the specific purpose.
Absolutely, my pleasure.